I grew up in New York City.
New Haven, Connecticut.
Denver, Colorado.
Born in Moldova.
In Israel.
Boston.
Frankfurt, Germany.
Baltimore, Maryland.
Brooklyn, New York.
The Bronx.
I remember when somebody asked me, how come that there's so many people from the East out here? I said, because that's as far west as you can go.
Coming to California was an opportunity to start over.
Always had wanted to move to California.
I wanted a Shabbat community.
I wanted to start an internet company.
Moving from the East Coast to the Bay Area was difficult.
Not originally in any way an enthusiast.
It's certainly a struggle here to participate Jewishly.
On Passover, you couldn't find a store that sold matzahs.
I hated it the first 6 months.
A little more spread out, a little more hidden sometimes.
A little bit more challenging to find it.
I struggled. I went to different shuls and services.
Once you find them, it's family all over again.
San Francisco soon felt like home.
And then I felt so free when I came to the Bay Area. There was this incredible openness.
My idea of bohemian heaven.
Hippies and peace and love.
Just a little bit of less pressure.
I was myself. I was in my element.
That's a very special kind of environment.
We're on a kind of frontier here.
We loved the interest in innovation.
Community of people who are seeking out the
There
future.
are people looking for something new.
No one's looking down on anybody, and no one's tisk-tisking.
That has transformed my life.
California was incredibly good to my family.
We have this homegrown family now.
It is where I belong.
Here, who wants to fight? We're living in paradise.
My full name is Herbert David Teitelbaum. I was born in San Francisco on May the 14th, 1926.
My name is Avi Rose. I live in Oakland with my partner and our 2 adopted kids.
Of course, I remember May 14th not only because it's my birthday, but because the State of Israel was established on May the 14th in 1948.
I had 2 older sisters going to school at Cal, so I spent a lot of my coming of age in the East Bay, in Berkeley, as a teenager in the late 60s.
My family came to San Francisco probably in about 1922. My father died when I was 2 years old. And that, of course, changed a lot of things in our family.
I wasn't very religious as a young adult. I had a strong identity as a Jew. I started coming out as a young gay man when I was in my late teens.
The heart of my life really took place in the Hebrew school at 745 Buchanan Street.
And at that time, felt like I had to choose between different parts of myself and different parts of my identity. So I pushed away somewhat from the Jewish community for a while, but I always felt strongly identified personally.
I found, my experiences at the Hebrew school and at the synagogue on Buchanan Street very meaningful for me, and I think it influenced me in many ways. I think by the time I was 14 or maybe 15, I decided I want to become a rabbi.
That became really a theme that ran through the rest of my life, really, is how to bring the different threads of myself together.
And when people asked me why I wanted to be a rabbi, my answer had nothing to do with God or religion. My answer was always, I want to help the Jewish people.
1978 was an amazing time to be in San Francisco, especially as a young gay man. It was the summer when there was a campaign against the Briggs Initiative, Proposition 6. There was a lot of activism. There was just a huge outpouring of energy and spirit and everything. This was pre-AIDS San Francisco, and it was a really exciting, wonderful time to be here.
The placement chairman of the Rabbinical Assembly, to which I belonged, said, they're looking for a rabbi in Redwood City. Would you be interested?
My first job out of graduate school was in Los Angeles. I moved back here in 1986 to be the first staff person of a Jewish Community AIDS project. supported by most of the agencies, the Jewish agencies in San Francisco.
Redwood City was very different because, first of all, it was a post-war community, and many people had moved out to the suburbs from the cities to rebuild their lives. I remember when somebody asked me, how come that there's so many people from the east out here? I said, because that's as far west as you can go. When people wanted to get away from a lot of the things that were tormenting them in the east, they would come as far west as they could go. And they came out here to San Francisco.
Because of the way that AIDS was impacting the community in general, the Jewish community wanted to step up and do something useful, do something progressive, and really take a leadership role, because really, if not us, who was going to do it?
Some of the central events of my life took place during my 38 years at Beth Jacob. And one of them, of course, was in 1965 when Martin Luther King issued his call to the clergy to come and help establish voting rights in Selma, Alabama.
And my job for 3 very challenging, rewarding, painful, unforgettable years was to motivate the Jewish community to have a compassionate response to AIDS, to serve Jewish people with AIDS and their families. At that time, most people with AIDS were gay men at that moment in the epidemic. The families were mostly parents coming from other Jewish communities, most of whom felt a lot of shame and secrecy and stigma, and came here and got a lot of love and support here and a lot of encouragement to come out, as it were, in their own communities.
I think what helped shape my involvement in the civil rights movement was both the Jewish tradition as I studied it and interpreted it, and the general environment of the Bay Area, which was one of great diversity of population, people of various nationalities, religions, ethnic origin. I think that is very important. And I don't think you find that to the same degree in other places.
Most people were not living with HIV. They were dying of AIDS. And people were going through this incredibly powerful and painful experience. And they weren't able, or they didn't feel like they were able to turn to their own communities and own congregations for help.
So I felt I had to go, and under the auspices of our local board of rabbis, 5 rabbis went, including myself. And I'll never forget what Martin Luther King said that morning when he addressed us. He said, "We are like the children of Israel, marching from bondage to freedom."
As I reflect on being a Jew in the Bay Area, with the pattern that I've experienced over and over is that this is a place that's provided people to bring different parts of their lives together.
I've always felt that the best way you teach is not only by what you say. You teach by example. You teach by what you do. And if our young people see their elders engaged in social action of one kind or another, this is powerful.
Once I knew I could be a gay man and a Jew and a progressive political person and all those things at the same time and in the same life, then it was a matter of finding my own way or forming my own way or creating my own way. It wasn't feeling like I was going to be excluded and I was just going to accept that. I never accepted that.
We had a project here locally in San Francisco in support of Soviet Jews. And at one point, I and a number of other rabbis, we chained ourselves to the gate at the Soviet consulate and we were arrested. This is very typical, I think, of what happens in San Francisco, and especially what happens within the Jewish community.
I think there's a particular way that this community, that the Bay Area Jewish community fostered that spirit of, you know, here we are.
When I think of California, I think of a very open space. It's open geographically, and I think it's also open in terms of ideas. in terms of inventiveness.
People came together, come together seeking authenticity, seeking to have a life that is full and real and inclusive of all of who they are as individuals, as artists, as activists, as parents, as everything that we are.
Jewishly, I'm very proud of what the Jewish community is and what it has achieved. And I'm delighted to continue to live here.
And I feel like that has transformed my life, and I think that I, in turn, have contributed a lot and have had more room to contribute here than I might in other places.